I'm not gonna lie, I am nervous doing this, because I know Star Wars fans know everything there is to know about the Star Wars universe and franchise, and I'll be honest, I'm not exactly a Star Wars fan. I was aware of the franchise, but didn't get interested in it until The Force Awakens was announced. I binge-watched all 6 movies, and I understand the appeal of Star Wars. With all these fantastic creatures existing amongst each other harmoniously, it gives us hope that there truly is a place in the universe for all of us. I would like to one day sit down and watch the Clone Wars series because I've heard nothing but positive things about that show. And in case anyone asks, the Disney Star Wars movies were uneventful to me. But if you like them, great. Nothing wrong with liking a movie. This will be very different from my usual videos. I did rewrite one other series, Kevin Smith's Masters of the Universe, but I managed to cover that in one video, unlike this series. Because covering Obi-Wan is going to be a series within itself, where I will be going over one episode per video. I'll also be changing the style in which I normally do these videos in. Normally, I narrate a scene first that I have changed, and then I explain my reasonings for the changes. However, I'm going to be discussing both simultaneously. I want to make it clear that I am aware that the history of Star Wars is vast and complex. With that in mind, I know that my version will be flawed. Yes, I am admitting that my version will have mistakes. Because I'm going based on the series and will be changing and rearranging according to voice complaints and of my own assessment. So if I get something wrong, please feel free to educate me, just be kind about it. That's all I ask. When first watching the series, I wrote down criticisms based on my first impression after each episode, and I will be exploring and expanding upon some of those thoughts, so here we go. First criticism is the opening scene where a Jedi is training a group of younglings. I thought the entire sequence was unnecessary and should have been placed later on into the story. I am aware of its significance, but the beginning of the show was not the place to put it. Second criticism is Reva. What drives Reva's character is her tragic backstory, and that's fine. She wants revenge for what happened to her as a child, and that's understandable. The issue was the execution of her character. Because of what happened to Reva, it's understandable that she's full of anger. But the thing is, I would think that a part of her would be subconsciously at least sympathetic towards Jedi, because when you give it some actual thought, Reva looks old enough that she should have retained some of the teachings that she received as a youngling. But apparently her encounter with that one Jedi, Anakin, was enough to erase the positives that she experienced as a youngling and make the sacrifices that other Jedis made mean nothing. The fact that some, if not all, Inquisitors are ex-Jedis is also a factor to consider on Reva's temperament towards Jedis. But at the same time, she's no different despite her motives. One more thing to consider is that the Empire could have reconditioned her when they took her in, making the memories not so clear. That would have actually helped explain her erratic behavior, but it's made clear in episode 5 that she does remember. Regardless, the lack of information only makes her character come off as the stereotypical angry female character. Third criticism, Little Leia. In the first Star Wars film, Leia is portrayed as a strong, opinionated, independent female character, and I can understand the creators wanting to transfer that into her younger years, but the defiant little princess trope isn't really working for me. Something that was addressed that I thought was very interesting is that Leia isn't fully accepted by some of the Organa family members because she's adopted. I think that should have been the focus of her character. Her reasoning for constantly running away and not wanting to go to the party because she knows she's going to be harassed by some of the family members, making her feel ostracized. It also would have helped if she was somewhat withdrawn due to this. This would also explain why she's nice to droids, because they don't judge her based on her blood lineage or lack thereof. That's all my first impression criticisms. Now on to the rest. When it comes to Kenobi, there are those that have criticized how Kenobi is being portrayed, and I know that a hardcore fan can easily point out everything that's wrong and explain why. But for a mid-watcher like myself, it makes sense. Kenobi's way of life has been completely destroyed. Most of his comrades are dead, and what few are still alive are being hunted, and he feels responsible for all of it. It was his paladin that assisted in the destruction of the Jedi Order. Not to mention that he feels that he failed Anakin because he was constantly warned by others and essentially ignored the warning signs. I really don't have any issues with Kenobi in episode 1. He's a fallen soldier that feels that he doesn't have a place in the universe anymore, and what little purpose he feels he has left, I would think, would be a constant reminder of his guilt and have him constantly asking, where did he go wrong? After watching the entire series and watching Reva's character development, or lack thereof, and knowing her backstory, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite and give my version of how I believe Reva's backstory should have taken place. When Order 666 commences, a group of younglings run for their lives and are left defenseless when their teacher is killed before their eyes. Believing this to be the end, they huddle together for comfort, but another Jedi appears. Believing to be safe, they run to him, but his eyes causes the children to halt. Realizing that the Jedi before them is not their ally, young Reva throws her helmet at him. The traitorous Jedi uses the Force and throws her across the room, impaling her and knocking her unconscious. The rest of the younglings are killed mercilessly. When the deed is done, the bodies are piled. When they collect Reva, they're surprised to find that she's still alive. When reported, the traitorous Jedi ponders for a moment, disturbed that the unconscious child mirrors a painful memory. But he makes his decision. The youngling will be spared, so she may be reconditioned and put to use serving the Empire. I know what you're thinking, but I promise you I have a reason and I will explain, but let me finish first. When Reva wakes, her injury is healed, but her memory is hazy. The doctor tells Reva that they can help her. She's strapped to a machine and Reva becomes extremely anxious and wants to stop, but a voice in the dark says that this is for her own good, that this will help her remember her purpose. Stepping out of the shadows, the Grand Inquisitor advises Reva not to resist. It only hurts more. The reconditioning begins. Over the years, the Grand Inquisitor monitors Reva, and when there's a sign of doubt, there is no hesitation from him. After several sessions, he's satisfied with the end result. With Reva and 2 other Inquisitors by his side, the hunt continues for the remnants of the Jedi Order. However, despite the numerous sessions, a mysterious pain within always resurfaces and seems to only increase. I know one of the biggest criticisms with Reva in the series is how did Anakin not know she was still alive? I can't explain that. I can only explain my version. But let me ask this first. How is it that a child can get stabbed in the stomach by a lightsaber and it not kill them immediately? Not to mention, she didn't receive any immediate medical attention and we don't know how long she went without any type of medical assistance. Another factor to consider is how long has she been with the Empire? Knowing some of this can only help us make better sense of her character. Now let me explain my version. The reason Anakin spared Reva was because when she was injured and unconscious, it reminded him of his mother. The last time Anakin laid eyes on his mother was after she had been brutally beaten and was barely conscious because she was on the verge of death, and at that moment, Reva mirrored his mother. That's the logic I'm using, and I'm sure a superfan could easily tear this apart, but I assure you I am trying to be mindful. The addition that I made was essentially to make her character more sympathetic, because it's obvious that's what the creators of the show was aiming for when they created her character, but it just didn't work out that way. I'm not 100% sure how reconditioning works, and I'm sorry if my version is inaccurate, but there is a reason that I added all this extra stuff that I will explain throughout my rewrites of the other episodes. I think it's about time that I start talking about the actual episode now. In the beginning, when we're being shown a recap of the prequels, near the end, I think it should have started glitching, showing that it's a dream, that it's Kenobi's dream, and by the end, Kenobi is startled awake by the memory. He's a little distraught, but eventually begins his day. That's how the series should have started, in my opinion, with the main character. Unless there is something that the audience needs to see beforehand, the main character should be the first thing we see, especially when it's his show and his name is the title of the show, and in case someone asks, an image of him from the movies does not count. Let's move on. When the Inquisitors arrive on Tatooine and go into the saloon, I liked it. I like that the Inquisitors weren't being portrayed as villainous bullies, but instead were methodical, which increases their threat level. I thought it was smart for Reva to throw the knife, proving the Grand Inquisitor right. The thing I didn't like was Reva pointing at the Jedi. I'm pretty sure they could have sensed where he was when he used the Force. Also, her attacking the Jedi felt unnecessary, and I've already addressed why in my criticism section. Last thing that sunk this scene was the line,
"Watch he's after scraps."
Scraps are all we have left.
That, in my opinion, takes away the threatening appeal that they started with. Instead, they now come off as hunters that overhunted and are now struggling to meet their quota or something. But isn't that what they wanted? They want to eradicate the Jedi. This is mixed signaling to me. What I would change would be that the fifth brother is now the one with the temperament problem and attacks the Jedi. But Reva stops him. The Jedi gets away and the Grand Inquisitor questions why she intervened. Reva answers, he could have had information, not just on who's smuggling the Jedi out of our reach, but also where others may be hiding. The Grand Inquisitor is pleased with her answer. This is where I'm going to change the order of events. I'm adding a new scene after this one that I hope will better explain the reasoning for the sequence of events in episode 1. If I don't mention a scene or two, it's usually because it's minor and I see no reason to change or alter it. When the Inquisitors are intimidating the civilians, again, it's the fifth brother with the temperament, and Reva is there to keep him from doing anything that would upset the Grand Inquisitor. With no one speaking, Reva talks instead. You all look like hard-working people, tending to your own business, not making trouble for anyone, but the Jedi, they don't care. They don't care if you have a family to feed. They only care about themselves and their well-being. Before Reva can finish, a woman speaks against the Empire and the fifth brother cuts her hand off. With the act of violence, Reva knows that no one will talk now. She announces they're leaving, but the fifth brother ignores her and starts questioning Owen. As the conversation gets more intense, the fifth brother gets ready to strike, but Reva intervenes, arguing if he drops a body, the civilians will scatter, angering the Grand Inquisitor, and asks if that's really what he wants. They leave, and Owen gives a sigh of relief as he goes about his day, but glares at Kenobi, who's unaware of what he just went through. First off, I want to make it clear that Kenobi is not present in this scene. He's unaware of the danger because it makes no sense for him to leave Luke when he has seen Inquisitors on Tatooine, and the fact that they killed Nari would only intensify the need to stay and protect Luke. Also, it seems apparent that he can't sense them in the show. I don't know how accurate that is, but I'm using that to keep him blind to the threat. So that way, when it's time to leave, he thinks that Luke is safe. The reason I rewrote this scene was because Reva was the original aggressor, and in my version, she isn't, but does have a bit of a silver tongue. Now let's talk about the violence. With a small group, if one or two people are hurt to be made examples of, it's probable that the rest will start singing like canaries because the probability of the assailants choosing you next is a lot higher than when you're in a larger group because there's safety in numbers and you can hide in the crowd, not to mention the Inquisitors are not in a controlled environment where they have the upper hand, quite the opposite. If the people get scared enough, they can run away. There are buildings everywhere, not to mention alleyways. Also, the Inquisitors are outnumbered as well, so it would be wise to tread lightly. I also wanted to show that the Inquisitors fear the Grand Inquisitor because I felt there was a lack of intimidation for the chain of command. I cannot believe that there is no consequence for the obvious lack of disrespect that Reva displays for the chain of command, which only decreases their threat value. This is where I'm going to add a new scene that I hope will help tie everything together in the first episode. Here we go. After Kenobi rejects Nari's plea for help, Nari wanders through town lost when he's ambushed. When he's captured, they torture him for information, asking where the other Jedis are and who all is helping the Jedi evade them. Nari is a well-trained Jedi who won't give in so easily. However, being well-trained gives him foresight to see that this is the end for him. With the Grand Inquisitor using the Force on him, Nari speaks. You think you've won. You think that you'll rule the galaxy for 1,000 years? The Jedi have been around for much longer than that, and will continue to exist long after your dark empire has crumbled into oblivion. The Force is eternal, and through it, we will continue our legacy of shining a light even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. The Jedi will rise again, stronger than ever, with Obi-Wan Kenobi at the helm. Reva draws her blade and permanently silences Nari. The Grand Inquisitor demands an explanation, and Reva answers that his words were sickening. They had resurfaced the pain within her that she had managed to push down up till now. The others question if what he said was true, but the Grand Inquisitor thinks nothing of it. But inside, even he was shooken by the Jedi's last words. Let me explain, because I know a lot of you are thinking, what the hell? First off, when people are faced with their mortality, the brain will often replay a pleasant memory or create a dream to distract from whatever unpleasantry that is occurring, and that's basically what's happening here. Nari knows he's going to die, but he doesn't want to be another fallen knight on their belt. He wants his death to mean something like we all do. So instead of just dying in silence, he reminds them and himself the power of the Jedi, and by doing this gives himself hope that yes, the Jedi will rise again, and in this moment a bolster. He says what he wished would have happened when he was reunited with Kenobi. I want to make it clear that he didn't mention Kenobi's name out of spite. He was caught up in the moment and spoke what he wished was the truth. The more he spoke, the tighter the Grand Inquisitor's hold was, which caused him to raise his voice, speaking over the pain. As he's preaching about the Force and the light, it makes Reva uncomfortable because his words was reaching into the depths of her being, pulling out that pain, which is a reminder that this isn't who she really is, which terrifies her because any doubt will cause her to be reconditioned, which caused her to snap and kill him. So truly, his words did sicken her with fear. This prideful last stand of this Jedi Knight is what triggers the Grand Inquisitor to investigate if there's any truth to what he said, which would eventually lead him to Senator Bail Organa and inadvertently to little Princess Leia. Again, I get what the creators were going for, but it really came off that Leia's a manipulating, spoiled brat. She first tricks her servants into lying to the queen, knowing that they're going to be punished for it. Maybe not the child, but the other three are old enough to know better. When she gets caught, she tells her mother that she's sorry for her misbehavior and gives her a hug only so she can pick her pocket for her toy robot. That's coming off psychopathic in my opinion. Even when she's putting down her cousin, which he rightfully deserves because he was being a little prick to her, kinda makes her come off a little unhinged. But I did like that scene, I really did. How I would rewrite the introduction of Leia would be her mother coming to her room to get her ready for the party, only to find that she's not there. Leia is enjoying her solitude with her toy robot, Lola, but she gets stuck in a tree. Leia is hesitant to climb the tree after Lola, but wants to help, showing traits of the original Leia that has yet to blossom. As she's climbing, she grabs a dead branch and falls, but her mother catches her. When all is said and done, they return to the palace. With my version, I didn't want Leia to be as confident as the late and great Carrie Fisher portrayed Leia as. Instead, I thought it would be refreshing if she was more reserved, and through her journey to get back home after being kidnapped, we see her transforming from a timid child running away from her responsibilities to a confident one ready to take her first steps in facing her destiny. I also want to lean into her struggling with her identity as a member of the Organa family. Everything else in the show was fine except for the chase sequence. Honestly, none of the chase sequences with young Leia makes any sense. It would have made better sense if she found a hiding spot and when she thought they were all gone, she crawled out and they got her. This next scene I hadn't planned on adding, but since Kenobi is unaware of the Inquisitors, and I honestly don't think that Owen would tell him unless it was necessary, because if Kenobi knew of the Inquisitors, he would want to be closer to Luke so he could better protect him, and that's obviously the opposite of what Owen wants. After the Inquisitors leave, Owen takes Luke into town. He's still on edge after his encounter with the fifth brother and keeps Luke close. As he's talking to a merchant, people start to gather in the street, and to Owen's dismay, Luke's curiosity gets the better of him. Owen runs after Luke, and when he catches up to him, quickly covers his eyes, as it's discovered what the commotion was about. Strung up for all to see is Nari. Owen walks away while still keeping Luke's eyes covered. The reason for this addition is because I wanted to show some type of tenderness with Owen because he's being kind of a dick. Kenobi just wanted to give Luke a toy, and I'm hoping that Owen took it away before Luke found it, because if he didn't, that would just be horrible. Quick side note, the whole toy incident doesn't happen in my rewrite, and there is a reason for that I will address in another episode. I hope that this scene does help convey that despite Owen's stern exterior, he cares for Luke. That's why he covered his eyes and essentially why he's pushing Kenobi away. That's pretty much it for the rewrite, except for one thing that I noticed that is starting to annoy me, and that is the cutaways between scenes. For example, after Senator Bail confronts Kenobi, it cuts to Leia being detained, then back to Kenobi digging up his lightsaber, and then back to the kidnappers questioning the morals of kidnapping a child, then back to Kenobi leaving the planet. The last episode was the worst to do this, and I will talk about it when we get to episode 6. The way I would change this is by extending Leia's scene. After Vect breaks Lola, he's approached by one of his crew members telling him he's got an incoming call. He leaves to answer it. It's the Grand Inquisitor. Once the call ends, a crew member questions if they've taken it too far. The scene ends, getting all that out of the way, and now we can focus on Kenobi as he prepares to leave both physically and psychologically. I'm sure someone watching can point out everything wrong with my rewrite and 100 other things that need to be changed within the show, but I just don't have the time to rewrite the entire show to that degree, so I'm just going to do it like this instead. But I promise I am trying to be considerate and put serious thought into the decision making of the characters and the cause and effect of the events of the story. Like I said, I'm not necessarily a fan of Star Wars, but I do respect and admire the franchise and its millions of fans along with the original creators. Please let me know how I'm doing with each rewrite, and feel free to correct me if I'm getting something wrong. Just please be kind about it. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe.